So we'll start with Francisco.
Good evening, Airport Commissioners and Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Henry Thompson. Welcome to Santa Barbara. I am actually talking about something that is on this paper agenda, but it's never addressed. So to me, it's not on the agenda, and that is noise abatement. I mean, I sit out there and I live at San Vicente and Guin, and even today, I was out there, beautiful day, out there doing gardening, working around the house, and this earth-shaking jet comes through low and fast, and so loud it is incredible. You know, this isn't the first time. You've all seen me here before. And this isn't the first time I've been talking about this for 6 months. And it didn't start till about 8 months ago, and that was after the new big building out there where they all come together, the terminal got built, the Ricard terminal, which was, if you know history, Mr. Thompson, that building is named after Ricard, the guy who gerrymandered the lines to include this property into the city, which, and we'll talk about that later. I want to talk to you, have a meeting with you, but so in doing that, nobody in the city is affected by the noise. All the people that are affected are outside of the city. We have no representation. We can't talk to our council people. You know, we need to come here and we need to get something done as good neighbors. And if there's any noise abatement, I don't know what it is, because I haven't heard it. All I hear is jets coming over. They're not going the approved flight path in. All I see is coming straight down my street, you know, where they shouldn't be. So we need to do something about this. We need to talk to the people. We need to talk about this before this project got done with the new expansion of the terminal. That was a major project. And I don't know if there's any environmental assessments or impact reports, but that needs to get done because it is totally, totally affecting our environment, our air, and most of all, the noise. And these things are coming so low. You know, I can see the rivets on the plane fuselage. And then the wake turbulence. I never heard that before in the 25 years I lived there. Now I'm hearing wake turbulence. I don't know if it's new planes that need to go faster, need more power, and have a different glide path in, but that didn't happen before, you know.
Okay, thanks, Francisco. And next we have Warren Butler.
Hi, how are you? I know most of you are Warren Butler from the Flightline Restaurant and Lounge that I'm transforming the High Sierra from. Just wanted to, number one, welcome Henry, and hope to see you in the restaurant soon, and we'll show you a little Santa Barbara hospitality. Not sure if we'll match up to that Louisiana hospitality, but I will try, and with the food. But I just wanted to, you know, I'm really excited to let everybody know. The community's been asking me, so I thought it was important for me to come here today and let you know that I'm ready to move forward with the Flightline Restaurant and Lounge. I've gotten the funding that I needed. Most of you know I've been working on this for a couple of years, and about a year ago it was made clear to me what I needed to do, what requirements were necessary to move forward with an assignment of the lease. So I'm here today to let you know that I have those requirements ready. I've forwarded them to the management team, and I'm excited, and I know the community is excited. Every day somebody comes by and stops by the restaurant and takes a walk around and so excited about the history that we're recognizing, you know, at the restaurant, and the staff. The staff I've been building for the past year, and we got a great base of people that are looking forward to things moving forward with the Flightline. So just wanted to let you know that I'm looking forward to going through the process and doing whatever it takes to quickly, hopefully, get things approved, and you will be very proud and enjoy, you know, coming to the Flightline restaurant. So thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Alrighty, and the last speaker slip we'll hold on to until we get, oh, actually we have 4 here. Audrey? Andrew, or is it Audrey? Andrew.
Andre.
Andre.
Don't worry, that's been happening my whole life.
That's all right. Well, then I guess it's not a surprise.
So my name is Andrei Belikov. I'm a local professional comedian of 12 years. To be honest, I performed in front of 2,000 people at the Arlington, and this is making me a little more nervous than those shows. I'm going to keep this serious if no one minds. I would tell some jokes, but I don't want to risk any controversy in case I don't have a permit for that. So my daughter was born 6 years ago, and I started, in order to be in town more and in her life more, a local series of comedy hideaway shows. And we've been running one next door that's been very popular for about a year. Some of you maybe have been or have heard of it. A month ago, we had a big break. John Cleese from Monty Python, Fish Called Wanda, 100 other films, caught the show, loved it so much, he's fully investing with us to open a full-time comedy club in downtown Santa Barbara. For me, this is a dream come true, and it's been the best month of my life. That is until I learned that possibly this local show next door might have to come to an end. Now, I don't understand the details of that. To me, it's shocking, it's confusing. So much heart and goodwill has gone into making the show a success. I cannot understand how bringing laughter into a room is a violation of anything. I don't know who we're bothering. I don't know what law we're breaking. I think this is an issue of free speech. It's an issue of art, diversity. We have a whole cross section of the city that goes and supports this show. There's a lot of wonderful things next door happening with Warren's Restaurant. You've got comedy, you've got music, and you've got this passionate effort to transition into an aviation-themed restaurant called Flightline. And with all the other challenges in the world, in the city, and in our lives, I'm wondering how this is a controversial one at all. So I hope that you'll agree with me that when you zoom out and apply reason, that this show is a good thing, and we should be doing everything in our power to support it and the effort of all the people that are trying to make it a success. Just a final note, I'm under the flight path of some of the airplanes landing. I live in Goleta, and I always give a thumbs up to the airplanes, and I hope you give a thumbs up to this comedy show. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for public comment at this point. And now we'll move on to the liaison reports. Do we have, I don't see Councilmember Dominguez here from Santa Barbara. And do we have a Goleta Council liaison? We do. Terrific.
Hello, I'm James Cariaco, your one and only Goleta liaison. We are actually assigned, and I am your actual liaison from the Goleta City Council, and I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to come here, and I just wanted to come up and welcome Henry and just say that we're very much looking forward to working with you, and I know that our city manager, Michelle, is working with you and your staff to try and get a meeting and get you up to speed on some of the regional aspects of your role here, and we look very much forward to being good regional partners and working collaboratively with you. So welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. On the consent calendar, we've got several items of minutes, property management report, rescheduling of council meetings, and a number of leases.
I would like, since we did not have a lease review subcommittee meeting, I would like to pull 7, 8, 9, and 10 off of the consent calendar and move them to the regular calendar so they could be, or the regular schedule so they could be individually discussed.
I'll second his motion.
Alrighty, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. So why don't we do this? We'll split up the consent calendar to the first 4 items, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are 2 sets of minutes, the property management report from February, and the reschedule of 2 airport commission meetings, the June meeting and the September meeting.
I do have a question about the reschedule. I believe that it was stated that there was 1 or more persons on the staff that would not be able to be there on those 2, which is why the movement.
That's correct.
Is that multiple? The reason I'm asking is I don't have a problem in moving generally, but I do know that people plan, some of the commissioners plan quite far in advance based on these meetings. And in the past, if the director only was unable to attend, the assistant, or in the case of Deanna, has run more than 1 meeting. So if it's only yourself that can't attend, I would prefer to keep the meetings as scheduled. If it's going to be, you know, if a whole bunch of you are going out, and I know we have an increased training budget, which I highly applaud, then I would say, obviously, we have to move the meeting.
And I think, I understand that is how it's been handled in the past, but I am trying to get my feet under me, and you know, until I feel comfortable that I do have my feet under me, I would feel better if I'm at each of the meetings. So I think I am the person that's causing the change, and I apologize for that, but I would feel much better if I were there.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Then, based on that,
So can we get a motion to
Oh.
approve the 3, 4, 5, and 6?
So moved.
Before we do, I have a question on the property management report. The lease in progress shows twice the square feet of the vacant footage. Is that due to 6100 Hollister falling into two different categories? Lease in progress was twice as much as the available space.
Okay, well, good evening, Commissioners. Let me look quickly here at your reference point, but I can say that 6100 does fall into two separate categories. There's available lease space and there's lease in progress. Some of these can be a little bit nebulous to keep track of because there are times when we will actually pull square footage out of what's considered to be leasable for different reasons. So that's essentially the explanation for that. And I should mention, too, that this report, which you have been seeing for many, many years, is near the end of its natural lifetime, I should say, because we are transitioning to a new cloud-based property management system that will generate reports which are much more intuitive and much more self-explanatory than this one. So hopefully you can bear with us for just a little bit longer before we can really do a serious upgrade to this report.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, so again, can I get a motion to approve items 3, 4, 5, and 6?
so move.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we'll put 3, 4, 5, and 6 to bed. And then I believe a number of the commission members have detailed questions on these leases. So why don't we just take them in order? Subject or number 7, and maybe what would be appropriate, Deanna, just given that we're going to do this, can you just speak to it for a minute or two to that lease, and then we'll let the airport commission ask questions.
Absolutely, and I'll go to the podium. All right, good evening, Commission Chair, Commissioners. So I believe here we're looking at two leases that are part of the new 6100 Hollister development. So that's item 7 and item 10. And then a lease over at the Northeast Hangars, and then a property again across the street off of Hollister. So if I could I'll speak to them in order. Maybe that's the easiest way to understand this. So the first lease is with a company called, I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly most likely, Kosaferic LLC. It's an R&D company local that's already here in the Goleta area, is in need of larger space for their operations. They're an R&D light manufacturing company. They do something that is incredibly difficult to actually explain for the layman. We have a few tenants that are like that, and this is definitely one of them. This company in particular is going to be leasing 3 of the locations in that development. So they're outlined here as units 5A and B in Building 5 and Unit 4B in Building 4. So some of those locations have street frontage and other ones do not have the street frontage. So we are going to be receiving $1.65 a square foot for the street frontage locations and $1.60 a square foot for the ones that are not street facing. And it's a lease that will include, it's exclusive of utilities and common area maintenance charges, which is something, as a term you'll be hearing us talk a lot more about, as something that we are putting into most of our lease agreements these days. So the second, number 8, is our lease agreement with FedEx. FedEx, this has been with us for a while, as you know. FedEx is a tenant that we could say that we inherited from Ampersand Aviation when that facility, the Northeast Hangars, reverted to us in 2018 in May. There was a period of time when we had no agreement with FedEx, and because of the duration that it takes to actually approve a long-term lease, we talked about this last year. What we did is we essentially negotiated the lease terms for the lease, but did a one-year short-term license agreement. And the primary reason to do that, of course, is to get them into a contractual relationship with the airport, but also we wanted to be paid for the time that they, from the start of their tenancy under our management. So there was always the intent that that was sort of a short-term objective that would get us to the point where we could finalize some of the finer details and then get it to City Council before the end of that one-year term. And so that actually is expiring in May of this year. So the lease is essentially very, very similar with some smaller modifications as what was approved by the Commission last year. Innovati. Innovati is a fabulous story for us here at the airport. It is a tenant that has been here at the airport on the south side of Hollister for probably a decade at least. R&D tenant, very reliable, great tenant. They have received a couple of government contracts that really are requiring them larger space, and we're happy for that. And they are looking to lease the building that we know as 114. It's across the street off of Frederick Lopez. That facility has been vacant since November of 2017. It was, prior to that, also used as an R&D and light manufacturing facility. So this is a perfect tenant for it. They're going to come in starting April 1st. There's a couple tenant improvements they're going to make. And the lease term, I believe, is 2 years with 2 automatic one-year options to start out with. So we're finally going to be getting that facility leased and generating some good revenue for the airport for it. And we already have a prospective tenant for the location that they will be vacating, which is even better. The last one, again, is 6100 Hollister. That is a local franchisee of a national company known as ServPro. So essentially, if you have a flood in your house or you have a fire, those are the people that you call, and they come in and help you remedy that kind of thing. So it's a local business. They are going to be leasing Suite A in Building 4 and paying $1.60 a square foot for that space. Which I should mention on all of these properties at 6100 Hollister, getting in the range of $160 to $165 for those properties, which is quite a bit better than we had initially estimated that we would get for them. I think we budgeted for $1.45 a square foot, so we're pretty pleased with that outcome. So I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have at this point.
I have a number,
Yes.
if I might start. So on the rates, as a for instance, so you, this first one, Cospheric, or however you say them, are paying $1.60, $1.65. What were they paying before in their old building?
I don't know that. I do know that they were located here in Goleta and that they were in a much smaller space that's not comparable to this space.
Okay,
I would presume that they're paying.
They were not an airport.
They were not an airport tenant, no.
Okay. Then I was curious about why it was 2 and 2 and 1 and 1.
It's really a matter of negotiation with the individual tenant, how much that they, the term that they are willing to commit to stay. But most of them, our target has really been at least 2 years. If we can get 3. In these cases, we've got a couple of 2-year terms with automatic 1-year options, which means, absent any communication from the tenant otherwise, then we know that they're actually going to have a longer lease term than we had hoped for.
So I guess I was under the impression that a lot of our previous leases were out in the order of 5 years. Is that not true for this type of?
Actually, most of our leases are there's a number of month-to-month leases that are out there. There's quite a few of those. We're actually trying to transition those into term leases. Okay. But typically, our leases are within the range of 1 to 3 years. That's really sort of the typical. Of course, it is desirable to get longer leases when we can, and usually the mechanism for doing that is establishing a fixed term and then some lease options at the back end.
And I did not notice in any of these lease statements CPI. In the past, we've had, I believe, LA CPI minimum 3, maximum 8.
Yes, they all do have a CPI increase built into them. I believe for the 6100 Hollister, that also can be sort of a matter of negotiation, whether it's a range or a fixed increase, or CPI, of course. But I believe in the case of these that they're likely in that range between 3 and 5%. So they do all have absolutely a CPI increase in them. That's standard.
Okay. That's it for me on that one.
Okay, I've got quite a few, and he answered, or you've already answered several of them. First off, I think your 165 a square foot is very appropriate. I've been leasing commercially in the Goleta area for over 20 years. I've got a business up Hollister, and I'm paying $1.65 a square foot. So I think that's wonderful that we're getting such occupancy so quickly, and I think congrats go to the staff for choosing, the right size, right type of places. I'm very happy that Innovati is succeeding in such. I did have some concerns in the limited amount of information that I've seen so far on their tenant improvements. I'm used to getting tenant improvements in properties and things like that. I see that we're going to give them their, essentially, deferral of their rent to pay them for their lease improvements. All I know is a roll-up door, and I'm talking, what, $48,000? And then also for them to get the benefit of that right up front, are they going to have these improvements done before they move in,
Those improvements are going to be done, commenced immediately upon their, and sort of I think the front end term was the first 4 months. Mm-hmm. That's the term in which they're hoping to get that roll-up door. Now, of course, there's permitting and some things like that that could slow that a bit, but that's by design. And typically, airports do not do tenant assessments at all. Obviously, that's very common in the private sector that you would have that. In this instance, it is a matter of that the tenant improvement actually does increase the long-term value of the building because it is a light industrial and R&D type property. But also in this case, we have to acknowledge that what plays into this is that we've had a vacant building for quite a considerable amount of time. It has been very difficult to find a tenant for that facility. So it is a matter of negotiation. We feel like we still end up with an ultimate per square foot lease rate that's within the range, and we get an improvement to the building with a roll-up door, and the rest of the improvements are actually fairly minor. There's a few office spaces that could be combined to make larger office spaces, really small, minor things like that. Some of the offices are very small, but it's an overall improvement to the facility. And also that Innovati has been a very steady tenant for us. And while they're committing to 2 years with a couple of automatic options, we have every reason to believe that they have the potential to remain a long-term tenant for the airport.
I know the company a bit, and I think that's a very correct assessment.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to make sure that this information comes up to the public forum level.
Sure.
What are we getting for our $48,000 is kind of what it's got to be more than a roll-up door and a paint job and a couple walls knocked down. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, absent, actually sort of a budget. I mean, they have prepared a budget for that improvement, so we didn't take them at their word that it's a $48,000 expenditure. But looking at what they're expecting to do and what we know current cost levels are for those type of improvements, we deemed that it was reasonable.
Okay, so at this time, you really can't speak to what else they're going to do. You can just assure us that.
Like I said, all of the other improvements, but I mean, the roll-up door is obviously the main improvement. The other improvements are of more configuration improvements inside the building.
I've just got a clue that my mic was off. Sorry, everybody. So yeah, I was just looking for more public disclosure. I think tenant improvements is a great way to go. I'm not against this at all. But just something that gets up into the transparency of we're giving somebody $48,000, what's the airport getting is what I'm digging for. I don't think you're making a bad choice by any means. I'm just trying to surface the details.
Right, right. And I think we obviously would be more cautious about it if we were coming to you with a proposal that was outside of the range of what our normal lease rates would be for that type of property. So obviously, despite that improvement, we're still getting a good lease rate for that building.
Yeah, I'm sure you're doing
Yeah.
really well on it, and I think the tenant improvement path, given the shape that many of our buildings are, is a great way to go. But I'm suggesting that maybe just for the transparency purposes, that in the public record, we show a little bit more of what the taxpayers got for their money, just to make sure nobody thinks anything funny is going on.
Okay.
So that was my
Great.
point. That concludes what I had.
I have a question on that. The $1.27, you say the net effective rent, is that taking into consideration the 48,000, or is that just the rent is $1.27?
It's taken into consideration their investment. So
Over a 2-year period then?
Right, right. So their rent will initially be lower, and then it will kick up to, I believe it's in the $1.46 range after that. It kicks up at one point after they've sort of gotten credit for that investment.
Now, is this the building that was occupied for so long and then became vacant, you said, in November, but they had to continue to pay us because their lease?
Yes, it was a company, was Teledyne Rason, that relocated their operations to Camarillo, I believe it was, or Thousand Oaks. And they were in a lease agreement, and we simply wouldn't let them out of that lease agreement. It was a binding agreement, and they chose to continue to pay rent until that lease was completed.
When was that?
November of 2017.
Oh, the lease ended in 2017?
Yes. So
Okay.
the building had not been occupied since probably 2015, I believe, somewhere around in there. So it had been unoccupied for quite a period of time.
Okay, and this is an expansion for them, but you say you already have someone potentially interested in their
Yes, we
old
do.
space.
Yes, we do.
How big was their old space, and what were they paying for
Oh,
square
well, their
footage to
old
get?
space, I believe, I'm going to challenge my memory, but I do believe they were paying in the neighborhood of $1.45 thereabouts a square foot, and their existing facility was quite a bit smaller. It was probably, probably 3,000 square feet, maybe. It's in building 312. So that's divided into 3 portions, and they had the most easterly portion of it. And they have a roll-up door in that location, so it's not at all strange that they would want to have a roll-up door.
Okay. And the FedEx.
Yes.
The 2 of the other hangars of equal size have been rented to or leased to the 2 FBOs, a Signature and Atlantic. I believe those 3 are all essentially the same size.
There's 4 hangars.
Right.
They're all essentially the same size. The most southerly hangar has been divided into 2 sections, as you
Right.
probably know. Signature leases that hangar, both sections of that hangar. And then FedEx leases one hangar that is of comparable size to the others, yes.
So my question is, the rate that FedEx is paying on a per square foot basis, how does that compare to the rate that, let's say, Signature or Atlantic is paying for hangars 1 or 2?
It is a bit less than what Signature and Atlantic are paying, but they're different uses. So I should say economic usefulness of the use of the space is very different from you're using it for essentially a transfer facility for cargo, or if you're storing aircraft. It's kind of like an apples to oranges comparison. They're not the same use. However, what we look at is what is a comparable lease rate for that use at different facilities at different airports. Now, there's a lot of variables, of course, depending upon if it's a big cargo airport or not a big cargo airport. But generally, when we've looked around at other comparable facilities elsewhere, that 90 cents a square foot is right in there where it should be.
Okay. You've answered all my questions.
I have a question on the FedEx lease. It says that water would be $23 a month and $15 a month for sewer, or the metered amount for water and 2/3 of the water calculation at these rates per unit. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, it's actually something it's a fairly standard calculation that the amount of water that you return to the sewer system is less than the amount of water that you are taking out of the water system.
Okay, so
It's
the 2/3 of the calculation is the amount of sewer.
that's going back into the sewer system.
2/3 of the
Yeah.
amount of metered water.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
That
that's pretty standard for
clarifies
all
it.
of the tenants, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had one more question for you on the FedEx one. Are they leasing some of the ramp space in front there?
The ramp space is, they're not paying specifically for the ramp space because we don't designate it as exclusive space. Even though they are using it more or less on a preferential use basis, we don't bind it up in that way. It can be used by other aircraft if we need to park other aircraft there. So we've just designated as it's a preferential use for them, but not an exclusive use. And no one has an exclusive use on that ramp out there. It's a preferential use. Now, the parking lot is a completely different story because they are leasing square footage of the parking lot for their vehicles, for an area where they load their vehicles, and then, of course, parking for their employees. So that we are charging a land rate for 26 cents a square foot, which is right on the nose of where it should be.
Well, that all sounds good for the vehicles. The ramp space, I know from experience with the FedEx people, is very critical to their operation. And I was merely asking to make sure that they have assured access to it. It's so critical that they get that space for their aircraft.
Yes, and that's, I mean, that's understood that they have first dibs on it, is a better way of putting it, is that, you know, their aircraft are going to be parked there. If there's for some reason a regular operation or some you know, need and their space, we obviously have the ability to use it.
Okay. And any protections to make sure that they'll be able to taxi in and out of that space?
I don't know if there's particular protections for that. It's not, I don't know, maybe Aaron could speak to that as far as their, you know, access to and from the ramp area.
I mean, being a commercial operator, lessee for the airport, we will assure them access, if not to their designated parking location, to a parking location that will work for their operation. We certainly don't want to hinder their operation.
Right. We all want to make sure that they're successful here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got a comment to wrap this up. First of all, congratulations on your effort at 6100 Hollister. It looks like you're almost completely leased. And that's a testimonial to the staff. My gosh, that's great. But I'm real impressed bringing a company like Cospheric LLC to those buildings. I mean, this is cutting edge nanotechnology coming right out of UCSB, material sciences and physics. It's nice to see that kind of a tenant in these industrial buildings. It's exactly the kind of companies we're trying to attract. It'd be a nice incubator for the community.
Anybody else? Okay, so why don't we try to take these all in one swallow and say, can I get a motion to approve the lease item 7 for Cospheric, item 8 for FedEx, Federal Express, item 9 for Innovati, and item 10 for Santa Barbara Restoration Servpro.
So moved.
Second.
Anybody opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's carried. Alrighty. Just a point of order before we continue here. We have 2 speaker slips that are on an issue that we're going to continue to talk about repeatedly, I'm sure. Those items are on the agenda. So according to Robert's rules, technically we wouldn't want to hear about those, but I think it's a reasonable exception and within my authority to say that we're going to go ahead and listen to those speaker slips on those items. But I do just want to point out that we probably among the staff will have to, you know, since we have kind of a noise abatement conversation at every commission meeting, that would then essentially mean no member of the public could ever speak to that item because it's on the agenda. So we probably have to work that detail out.
Well, they could speak during item 13.
Right, but as I understand it, it's, you know, items that are not on the agenda, and this is on the agenda.
But they can speak in public, in the first public, to an item that's not on the agenda, but then they can speak individually to any item that is on the
Okay,
agenda.
so I may stand corrected there. At any rate, we're going to hear those, but let's maybe combine conversations on that and just make sure we're all in sync.
Sure.
But we certainly want to hear what everybody has to say, because I know you're hearing lots of things over there as well. Pardon me. So on to item 11, I think we're going to get an administrative report on the proposed operating budget for 2020 and 2021.
Good evening, Airport Commissioners. My name is Tom Bullers. I'm the administrative analyst for the department, and I'm going to present a little bit on the recommended FY 2021 operating fund budget. So just a quick outline of the presentation. We'll do a quick overview of the department, look at the budget framework and our budget assumptions, and then move on to a little bit of details on the FY 2020 budget. So we are an enterprise fund. That means we are financially self-supporting. We don't use any local taxes for the operation of the airport. We generate revenues from tenant rents and user fees, and that's how we pay for our expenditures. We're also an FAA Part 139 certificated airport, and with that certification comes some FAA regulations and some TSA regulations as well. Just a quick look at our department staffing. We're proposing a couple of new positions for FY 2020, one in our business and properties group to help generate some new revenues, and one in our certain ops group to focus on TSA and other security related issues. You can see here that, you know, our positions are really concentrated in this maintenance, security, and certain ops functions, so safety and security are definitely priorities for the airport. In terms of the budget approval process, this kind of kicked off in February with meetings with the airlines to talk about rates and charges. We're here tonight at Airport Commission. We met with the budget subcommittee last week. The city administrator will propose a budget in April, and then finally City Council will adopt our budget in June. So again, we had a few major priorities here when we were putting together the budget. So just to highlight 4 of those: safety, security, customer experience, and revenue generation. And then sort of our general budget development approach. We try to look conservatively at our expenditures. On the revenue side, we have some reasons for optimism, especially with the growth in our passengers and airlines. And then we also look to maximize our grant opportunities. So some assumptions specific to the FY 2020 budget. We're assuming some stable macroeconomic conditions so that the economy is going to continue kind of on a status quo pace. Fuel costs will be the same, et cetera. Generally, when we look at the general aviation and commercial industrial, we're seeing some stability there, projecting stability. We also negotiate our rates and charges, so that is a driver of our budget. And then finally, we have some significant air service changes. So in FY 2020, we're projecting about a 17.5% increase, and then another 4% in FY 2021. And this is driven a lot by changes, the new air service from Delta that's starting in August, but also some increased frequency from Sun Country and Contour Airlines. So a lot of our airlines have been adding a lot of capacity. One thing to note on this slide here, our previous highs were in this 2006, 2008 range. We took a slide in our enplanements, and then we've bounced back pretty robustly in the last few years, and projecting our most passengers ever in FY 2020. Some challenges. This is a frequent refrain, but we have limited revenue and we have significant capital needs. We can never generate all the revenue we need to meet our capital needs. Airline lease negotiations, again, we negotiate with them annually on the rates and charges. Our airline leases do expire at the end of FY 2020. It was a 3-year lease. So we'll be looking to negotiate some new leases with them. And then finally, increased passengers do have some challenges, especially related to terminal capacity and airline office space and our apron and gates and concessions. And Deanna has an item a little later to talk about some of this in more detail. So for FY 2020, we're proposing generating about $23.6 million in revenue. That's about an 11% increase from where we're projecting to end the current fiscal year 19. I'll just point out a couple things on this pie chart here. Non-commercial aviation, a few years ago that was more in line, about 12%, but when we received the 495, when that lease expired and returned to the airport, the ground lease expired, it boosted that revenues significantly. So we've seen kind of a shifting so that we're kind of more balanced between these four major categories: the terminal, which is things like parking and rental car and other concessions; commercial aviation, which is our commercial airlines; and then commercial industrial here. Our 2020 expenditures are about $22.1 million. That's about 4% above where we're projecting our FY19 expenditures. Salary and benefits over here. This is the big chunk of our expenditures. And we also do indirectly pay some salaries and benefits. Our ARF costs are allocated here in supplies and services, and that's related to our contract with the fire department to provide ARF services. So looking at those two things together, we have about a $1.5 million surplus that we're proposing for FY 2020. And then again, Deanna's going to talk a little bit more in detail about what all of these items are. But in terms of the budget, some of these items are starting in FY19. And the item that I really want to point out here for FY19 is this new boarding bridge. So that is included in our grant application for our AIP grant, FAA AIP grant. And we typically receive that grant in July or August of any year, but we're proposing to start kind of fund that from our reserves this year to the tune of about $1.1 million, and then we'll reimburse ourselves when we receive the FAA grant. Just to highlight a few capital projects, we have about a $2 million capital budget for next year. That includes our AIP grant match. As you know, this is a very beneficial grant for the airport. We pay about 9%, and the FAA pays about 91% of any project's cost. So it's a good investment for us. Lessee building maintenance. This is just the standard maintenance that we need to do on our commercial industrial buildings. Street maintenance, the big project there is slurry sealing the long-term parking lot. And finally, in terminal maintenance, the major project there is installing our federally mandated pet relief area. So just looking at reserve levels in terms of the bottom line, in FY19, using those monies for the boarding bridge, you can see about a $600,000 below budget. Again, this is sort of a cash flow issue in that we need to spend the money up front, but we're going to get recouped next fiscal year. And as you can see, between the FAA grant revenue and our surplus that we're budgeting, will be about $1.4 million above reserves. So the Budget Subcommittee did review and recommend that Airport Commission recommend council approval of this budget. They met last week, and with that, we would ask for a recommendation to council to approve the Airport Department's fiscal year 2020 and 2021 operating budget.
I noticed in one of your slides you were talking about shared use passenger processing. Pardon me. I noticed in one of your slides you were talking about shared use passenger processing. Is this something new, or this is a continuation of what we've been doing already?
This is something new. So right now, airlines have proprietary equipment at each of our gates. The shared use passenger processing system would allow any airline to use any gate. So there's a lot more flexibility in where the airlines can board aircraft.
Do they pay for this equipment usage or get some kind of or is there an additional charge? Instead of having 4 CRTs for 4 airlines who might use Gate 4, you're going to have one that can go over to whichever airline's res you need, is what I'm assuming. What kind of cost are we looking at for that?
So the total project cost, we're estimating about $300,000. And then that gets rolled into the airline rates and charges eventually, so they do pay for it eventually.
And they're aware and in favor of this?
Yes. Deanna will get into the gate constraints, I think, a little bit more, but
You know, the Budget Subcommittee combed through this in great detail, and we found a couple of surprises. One was the 17% growth. That's larger than we've experienced, but certainly based on the projected number of seats that we're going to have next year and our historic load factors, it seems eminently reasonable, and it's a good estimate. There was another surprise. There was a $50,000 consulting contract proposed, and this is something new for the airport, where we would retain a consultant to guide us on the calculation of costs for the airlines. And I think, Director Thompson, you might address that to the committee.
Absolutely. As Tom mentioned, our lease and use agreement that we have with our airlines expires at the end of this budget year. And so this year we have to enter into negotiations with all of the air carriers. And historically, we've had an agreement that's really just kind of been carried over to the point that it doesn't exactly fit our business model today, number one. And number two, the methodology for that lease agreement and the calculations isn't really clear. So we propose hiring a consultant to help us identify best practices and what the most appropriate lease agreement is for us today. So we think this is going to be hugely beneficial for us. We are doing this in partnership with the airlines, so we have already discussed that with them as well.
Now, the bottom line is, what's the return on the investment for this $50,000? We may well recover it all in cash, but if we don't, there is due diligence on our part that we're making these calculations correctly, and there's the comfort of knowing that we have explored what the options and alternatives are. So
Absolutely.
It seems like an eminently reasonable expense.
And so first of all, the budget is proposed for $50,000, and so we'll enter into an agreement with a consultant up to $50,000. And the return on investment, we believe, will be a much improved agreement that is more beneficial to the airport and in line with what's acceptable for the airlines as well.
It seems a very reasonable expense.
Thank you.
I would, along those same lines, because I asked the same question at the budget subcommittee meeting, is my understanding that it's been many years since we've done this. So this isn't a $50,000 every year or two.
No.
It's should last us many, many years, this new agreement, as the old one has.
Absolutely. First of all, the airlines no longer sign 30-year leases the way that they used to. But we do hope to get a 3 to 5 year lease agreement out of them, and then be able to continue those terms into the future, provided it's a favorable agreement for both parties.
I would also like to note that the budget included an increase of $22,500 for training and some additional professional conferences for staff, and I would like to applaud the addition of that. I think staff development and additional training is always extremely helpful.
Thank you.
I just had one question. Given that we're going to be 600K under as a result of cash flow funding the terminal bridge, does that require city council approval, or is it kind of just a conversation?
It does
Or
require.
as part of the budget approval, basically?
Yeah, when we use reserves, when we go below policy or project that we're going to do that, we have to have a plan to repay it, and so our plan is.
And that's part of the budget. Is that part of the budget process with the city council, or is that a separate conversation?
It will be part of the budget process, but also whenever we award and appropriate money for the boarding bridge, that will be a part of that.
Got it.
Conversation.
And Deanna, you're going to talk more about the gates and the terminal over there. Okay. Well, I know I wasn't able to join the budget committee this time around, but I am 100% sure there was a lot of diligence put into that, and I appreciate all the work that you do in the back there, Tom. I picture you back there with the accountant's hat and the pencil on there, feverishly going through numbers. But thanks for all that. Do I have a motion to recommend approval of this and forwarding it to the city council?
I so move.
And a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alrighty then. Thanks, Tom. And item number 12, a report on airline rates and charges for 2020.
So this item is, again, related to the airline rates and charges for FY 2020. So that would be starting July 1st of 2019 and running through June 30th of 2020. So we already mentioned the operating permits expire at the end of FY 2020. And those permits kind of lay out the requirements that the airport or airlines have to serve at the airport. So there's security requirements, there's operational requirements. And it also provides for annual adjustments to their rates. So just want to highlight, the commercial airlines are an important driver of the airport budget. If you look at that pie chart from the budget, in FY 2020, they're about 58% of our overall revenues when you take into account the concessions revenue that they generate. So they pay terminal rent, they pay landing fees, but again, those passengers then rent cars, park in the parking lots, buy food at the restaurant and gift shop, et cetera. And again, when we're looking at negotiating these rates with the airlines, we factor in those passenger increases, but the landing weights, et cetera, that are associated with those increases. The airline agreements lay out kind of the basis for the rates and charges. So we look at expenses for the operations and maintenance of the airport. For the airline terminal, we pay debt service, and that's split between our airport operating fund and passenger facility charges, so there's a little bit of a credit for that. And then we also have mandatory reserve funds, so the airlines have to contribute to those, and those are mandated by our city council, those reserve fund levels. Just wanted to highlight one of the fees, since it is a new fee that maybe we're a little less familiar with, but in FY 2019, that's this fiscal year, we established a new per turn fee for seasonal less than daily type service, and this was really brought about by Sun Country entering the market last August. Since they began operating at twice a week service, and they only operate on a seasonal basis. So trying to make a new fee for them that was kind of proportional, a fair charge for their service. And again, this applies to the joint use of common facilities, so it's areas like the hold room and the baggage claim areas. They still pay the exclusive use rates for exclusive use space. So we did meet with the airline property representatives back in February and distributed a cost analysis, excuse me, and rates and charges based on our FY 2020 operating budget, and they unanimously agreed to the rates that we were proposing. So just a quick chart on what those are, comparing the FY 19 actual and 2020 proposed. Terminal building rentals up about 3%, the landing fees down about the same. Boarding bridge and remain overnight fees down a little bit. We're not proposing any changes to the fuel flowage fees. And then with our increases in enplanements and deplanements, a decrease in the per turn fee. The Budget Subcommittee met last week again and recommended approval of the airline rates and charges to the full commission. And then we would also ask that Commission approve the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2020 for $110 a square foot annually for terminal building rental, landing fees of $3.99 per 1,000 pounds MGLW, boarding bridge and remain overnight fees of $39, fuel flowage fee of 5 cents a gallon per gallon sold, and seasonal per turn rate of $3.06 per enplanement and $1.87 per deplanement.
All right, thanks, Tom. I guess I can see why they unanimously agreed. Everything went down. If they didn't unanimously agree, I'd wonder what was going on there in the room. Is that because of the increase in volume and it's spreading over? Is that primarily the reason for the decrease?
Yeah. So, for example, for landing fees, this fiscal year we're projecting about $2.1 million. But next year for FY 2020, even with this reduced rate, we're projecting about $2.6 million in revenue. So
wow.
Just a big jump in the actual revenues that we'll receive, even with the reduction in rate.
And we renegotiate these year in, year out. So we're not locked into this, because this assumes that increase is in fact going to happen, which, by all indications, it seems like it will, but okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious to know regarding the new boarding bridge, given what it costs and what it will return per year, what do we figure it takes to kind of amortize it, recognizing it's pretty hard to operate without it and generate more business?
So that the boarding bridge is an AIP grant project. So the AIP grant will pay about 91% of that cost. So it'll only be a little over $100,000 in cost to the airlines, amortized over a 20-year useful life. So it's not a significant cost increase to the airlines.
And when is it projected to be completed and installed? With some great fanfare, I presume.
As soon as possible, but probably at the earliest about 12 months out. So, but we're working feverishly to make it happen as soon as possible.
Thank you.
The budget shows that the airport will fund the bridge in the 2019 budget, and the FAA will reimburse us in 2020.
Any other questions from the commission? Alrighty, so can I get a motion to approve the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2020?
So move.
Second.
So move.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alrighty. Why don't we do this? I'd like to swap item 13 and 14. And so, Deanna, you're going to talk to terminal capacity, since that's pretty tightly tied to what we've been talking about, and then we'll do noise abatement last.
Okay.
And give the speakers the opportunity to speak. So item 14, terminal capacity enhancements.
All right. Good evening again, Commissioners. This is an enjoyable presentation, even though what we're talking about here is essentially problems. But in the airport industry, these are the kinds of problems that we like to have. It's a common phrase we use, good problems. So with the increase in enplanements, and if you think of it in terms of carriers, if you imagine in 2016, Santa Barbara had 3 airlines. By August, we'll have 7 airlines. And obviously with the potential that there could be additional carriers and certainly additional routes after that. So we are working very hard now to launch a new program consisting of a number of projects that are designed to increase the capacity we have to serve these passengers. And we're calling it our Terminal Capacity Enhancements Program. There are a few different components to that, and I'll talk about some of them tonight. We've already touched on a number of them. The first one is the ramp reconfiguration project. which I'll touch on, Shared Use Passenger Processing, or SUPS. We always have to have an acronym. The boarding bridge at Gate 3, and then also one we haven't talked about yet, which is our concessions program renewal. So first, talking about the ramp. We always have to have a diagram. I wish this one could be a little bit better. But this is our existing terminal facility and our parking positions on the ramp. And if I can get the pointer to work here, we have parking position gate number 1 right here. You can see where the bridges are coming off the terminal. 2, 3, and 4. And then terminal gate number 5 has 4 ground loading parking positions. It is a little bit of an illusion here because it's not nearly as good as it looks. Gate number 1, and if the history that I have been told is correct, the terminal was designed mostly with the idea that regional jets would continue to be the aircraft that would primarily serve this airport, which that is a reality that has changed and continues to change. So this is really where Gate 1 comes into play here. Gate 1 currently only serves regional jets. That's all it can do. And so we have little flexibility there, or I should say no flexibility, to deal with air carriers that send us narrow-body aircraft. It's unusable for that. So gate number 2 currently is a very popular gate amongst our carriers because it can handle narrow-body aircraft. Gate 3, as we've talked about, is there is a door, but there is no bridge. So it is effectively not a gate for us. And gate 4, again, is a very popular gate because it can accommodate narrow-body aircraft. Gate 4, if we have airlines that have preferences and actual needs with regard to how they board their passengers. So, for example, Frontier, which is a fairly large narrow-body aircraft, they prefer to ground board out of Gate 5 because they dual-door board. They board both from the front and the back. So they can use that position for that. Other carriers don't do that, and so they're pretty much really only appropriate for our gate positions. Okay, next slide. So, as I said, there is this constraint on Gate 1. There's a domino effect, and if I can flip back for just a second here, because 1, as you can see, aircraft pretty much at this point kind of back straight out. So in order to change that, we need to create space south of that parking position. And so how we do that really creates a domino effect relocation where we need to move the rental car return area that is just south of that gate. We need to relocate the service road that comes off of the terminal. We need to move the airfield fencing and a security gate. And unfortunately, it also means a loss of ramp space for Atlantic Aviation. It's really a domino effect moving about 60 feet to the south. So the end result actually, oops, excuse me, one is too far. The end result, as you can see here for Gate 1, and you can see the overlay with the parking lot right here with the rental car return. So why that needs to be relocated. But the end result of that, of course, is you have narrow-body aircraft that can use that gate. We'd have narrow-body aircraft on 2, and really the entire markings for the ramp area will be redone so that the end result then is that you have the ability to put 4 narrow-body aircraft, of course, assuming the Gate 3 jet bridge, that's a necessity. You'll have the ability to put 4 narrow-body aircraft on at one time at the terminal, in addition to your Gate 5 relocation. So this is obviously a critical path project for us. We learned within the last day or so that American Airlines is going to be putting a mainline aircraft on the Phoenix route, at least for the month of June. We were blissfully thinking that they would continue to run RJs to Phoenix and we could have them at that gate. And now we're presented with a new challenge. So it's constantly trying to keep up with this challenge that, you know, they present us with what they're going to send us, and we have to figure out where we're going to put it. And so this is really a critical project for us. What ties into that is the next piece, which is the shared use passenger processing. This map here shows you what the configuration currently looks like. Gate 1, we have American Airlines. Gate 2, we actually have 2 gate podiums, the stations, one for American and one for United. And then down at Gate 4, which again is our only other jet bridge, we have kind of stacked up down there We have Alaska and United, Frontier, our newest carrier, and another gate for United. So essentially what you have there in those podiums is you have proprietary equipment, you have a proprietary setup for the printers, the bag type printers, all that equipment has been installed by the carriers. It's only theirs and how they have configured it with computer hardware and software that it's their proprietary platforms. So in other words, we don't have the option, except in the instance of the last two carriers we added, which is Contour and Sun Country, because those carriers want to use a jet bridge, and Gate 2 is the only one that we have availability on for them. They're using rollaway carts. They're literally, they tuck them in a corner and roll them out. They have a little printer on them. It's, not exactly the best image for the airport, perhaps. For them, they're lower cost carriers, doesn't disturb them so much, but it's really not a preferable and certainly not a long-term situation. And with the addition of Delta, which also is interested in Gate 2, all of a sudden we've sort of reached a critical clog where that's just no longer workable. So, and Frontier, by the way, ended up going into this gate podium that had been occupied by Alaska. So we've already done a lot of shuffling. So shared use passenger processing, if you've been to just about any airport, you see it, whether you really notice it or not, especially the large international airports, you'll see it. It's really the industry standard solution for confined space, for limited space, or where you have gates that you're trying to maximize your use of those gates, the number of turns per day. What we are looking at and what the airlines are amenable to is really something that it's been around long enough that the bugs are out of it, and that's why the carriers are comfortable with it. It's essentially a software and hardware platform that is managed by the airport, that is essentially a technology portal to their native platforms. So if you envision it, you're an airline employee, you go up to a gate counter, you log into the system. You'll have your little icons, you log into it, and as soon as you've logged into it, then you're into the proprietary platform of whichever carrier you are. So it's merely a matter of logging into the system. So instantly you have a flexibility that you didn't have before. A greater degree of responsibility on the airport, of course, but we get more use of our limited footprint without having to expand that footprint where we just don't have the space. So it's standardized everything for the carriers. They can go any place, and it really maximizes our ability, not only in normal operations, but particularly if we have abnormal operation or irregular operations where we really need to put an airline at a gate that they don't usually use. We have the flexibility to do that. So here's sort of the map afterwards. So now you have Gate 1. This is our, it's SBA here everywhere, and you've got the ability to move the carriers around as you need to. So it's really a solution that it's time for us to do that. Now, we're proposing initially to just put it in the gate area, which is where we really have the pinch point. And if I could make this bigger to show you the congestion, you kind of get the sense of the congestion here in ticketing, where we basically have every single nook and cranny taken up by either airline ticketing offices, baggage offices, or queuing space and their actual ticket counters. You can actually extend the shared use platform to the ticket counters so that they have the ability to move around at ticket counters as well. So that's a possible thing for the future. So this is Jet Bridge 3. It really speaks for itself. Installing a new bridge that will actually go somewhere for us. That's actually a picture of the door to Gate 3. It's very anonymous. No one would ever know that if you opened it, you would just fall straight down onto the ramp.
Kills you.
Yeah. And of course, the door to Gate 4 is marked 3 and 4. It's actually a bit humorous. So Gate 3, of course, it was postponed originally when the terminal was built as a cost savings in consideration of the employment levels that were at the time. It made sense. Of course, as Thomas talked about, it's eligible for federal funding. It would be an identical glass bridge to the ones that we have become known for, and it will take us approximately a year to procure it, permit it, and install it. So we would have that last jet bridge, and we would have our 4 narrow body jets. So concessions. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about that. You have the concessions today that, did you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, because before you leave the subject of narrow body versus regional jet, the difference in the amount of passengers that the RJ versus the narrow body will be able to bring us?
Right, so the RJs that we typically get seat between 50 and 70 passengers. What they're being replaced with today is the Embraer 175 aircraft, and those hold 76 passengers. So, and that is considered to be a narrow body aircraft. We can't put an Embraer 175 on gate 1, for example, and where that becomes relevant for us is the Dallas service. American is going to be increasing the frequency to 2 dailies to Dallas, and it will be with that Embraer 175. So we'll have to put it at gate 2 because that's where we can put it, but that's one more frequency a day at gate 2 that's already heavily congested. So.
Thank you.
All right. So concessions. You have today in the terminal what you had in 2011 when the terminal opened. You have one full-service restaurant and bar upstairs in the secure area. You have a branded coffee, which you wouldn't necessarily distinguish as being separate, but it is separate. It's sort of part of the restaurant and bar. Amazing how much productivity you can get out of 170 square feet. There is a non-branded, and by that we mean it's not a Starbucks or a Coffee Bean or anything like that, downstairs, pre-security, and then you have one gift shop that's about 800 square feet. That's what you have. They are they're performing well, but this is the point where if you're looking at a 17% increase in employments, and we've already had the increases that we've had, that you really need to look at a renewal of that, and it's about time for that. So a number of components to this. One is renewing the existing brands and concepts. We already have on the docket that the main restaurant will be reconcepted in the year, and that means it will have likely a different look, a different menu. It will look like a new restaurant. And part of the reason for doing that, of course, is that after being in the terminal for 8 years, people want to see something new, and it always, almost without exception, leads to an increase in sales because people are curious to see what the new offering looks like. We do need to expand the footprint of that restaurant a bit as well because it could be a little bit more efficiently used. So one thing that we need to do is complete a demand analysis, which is a fancy term for looking at the number of passengers you have, the square footage that you have for various types of concessions, and the productivity or the sales per employment that you're getting out of those, because we make money off of a percentage of sales. So there are some industry-wide metrics that will tell you if your concessions are as productive as they should be, or if there's some indications that you have a significant amount of walk-off business, which is what we think definitely on the post-security coffee, that we have a lot of walk-off business. So we'll identify the amount of supportable square footage. You don't want to put too much in because then your operators have difficulty surviving. So it's a good balance. Look at what locations we have. The terminal was built to have more locations than what it currently does, although some of those spaces have been taken up with other things. So I'm looking where we can put those. And then really looking at the business opportunities that we can create on a permanent basis, put those out to the marketplace. And also look at some seasonal opportunities. Do some at the holidays, do some retail pop-up type opportunities in the terminal, which is very common these days. So just to look at, there are some places out there that we could investigate as being appropriate for that we call an inline locations, what we currently have, or even larger kiosk type locations. And then to point out one area which I think is an underutilized area is the outdoor patio here, which is about 2,300 square feet. There's definitely a way that space could be used more efficiently, and we could have some type of food service there, particularly if we need to expand the ticketing area and we end up losing square footage of that for that cafe. So it's pretty exciting to be able to look at renewing some of these things, and it's definitely time to do it. So happy to answer any questions about these components here. We are doing a lot of planning, of course, for the potential that we have new air carriers come in, because as on that one map, we're pretty full. So, we are looking at the potential that we might have to have some modular buildings if we get a new carrier for tickets, for airline ticket office and that kind of thing.
I had a question for him. You were talking about the cascading effects of enlarging the ramp for the airport, which we got to do, given, and of course we're making up, I'm assuming, the rental car parking, but you're taking away from Atlantic.
Yes.
No mention was made on any attempts to mitigate the effects on Atlantic.
Yes, we actually, of course, we are trying to mitigate that effect. I mean, it's not something that we obviously find desirable. It was something that was foreseen, however. Atlantic lost space when the terminal was built, and in the latest lease agreement, there is a provision in it that there was an anticipation that that could happen. And so essentially that is what is materializing. So how we're going to mitigate that effect, we're going to mitigate it with what we have, which is ramp space in the proximity of the 495 South Fairview hangars, the northeast hangars. We do have some parking spaces that are available there that are closer to the more southerly hangar. So we're going to, even though it's not necessarily exclusive space, we are going to create a system whereby we can work with Atlantic. When they need aircraft to park there, we will preferentially park those aircraft there. So it's about 4 parking spaces. It's not it's not ideal, obviously, because it's not contiguous with their location, but it is what we can do. We're really trying to make a good faith effort because it's not something that we obviously want to do, but out of necessity, we have to.
Right. I just wanted to know what we're doing to take care of a good tenant.
Yes, we certainly do not want to leave any one of our tenants high and dry. That's in nobody's interest, of course. So, and you know, we're working hard to do it. It's not always easy, of course. We'd like to do more, but we work with what we have.
Okay, thank you.
I remember many of us wondering when, and lamenting the loss of the old terminal, how we were ever going to fill this huge building that many people have their name on and that we built, that beautiful terminal. And wow, here we are, crunched for space in that building. So I think, Deanna, you spoke to this a bit, but I just have to underscore, I'm sure we haven't stopped our efforts to attract more. Because, of course, we never know if somebody who's here will leave. So, and we don't necessarily have a crystal ball, although the FAA publishes information on how air traffic is going to grow, and we certainly have data that we can look at trends on. But I presume we're pursuing more.
Yes, we have not changed our air service development objectives one bit. It's one of these things that is, it's very important for our credibility, obviously, that once we've pushed on the gas, looking for new service, we don't take our foot off the gas just because we've become constrained for space. We fix our space constraint is what we try to do.
So in keeping with that, I'm sure staff and our new airport director are thinking hard about, when we're successful doing that, what we have left to mitigate, or what we have, you know, where we have left to do. You mentioned maybe some portables for ticketing. You know, gates are the gates. I mean, we've got 4 gates, and or hope to have 4 gates soon, and then the ground thing there. I guess there's not a question there, just presumably it's at very top of your list of, okay, we might be successful encouraging more people here, in which case, if they say yes, what are we going to do?
And I can say, too, that the old terminal, we do have one airline in there now that is using that as airline ticket office. Yes, we do.
Who?
Contour.
No kidding.
And we are looking at fully utilizing that space.
Go figure.
For our air carriers. So that is one of the things that's on our radar screen as well.
Okay, and kind of segueing to that, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder who's going to speak, but with all that wonderful new air service comes more traffic, more passengers, more aircraft coming and going. And so I know that we have established or reestablished or re-energized the Noise Abatement Committee, and are very lucky to have a retired airline pilot who knows what actually happens in the airlines. And who else is on that committee?
Paul and Carol, and who's
Okay.
our alternate?
So with that, I guess, Henry, I'd ask you to speak just for a minute before we get to item 13 on, what recognition we're giving to the fact that with all this increased stuff, which is, it's good for the community, it's good for bringing people and revenue in, but it has consequences, and those consequences, some of those consequences are going to be amplified. How are you considering that?
So first of all, one of our highest priorities is to be a good neighbor. So we're going to continue to work on efforts to mitigate wherever there's a problem. Before you today, we'll have a presentation on noise updates to share with you what we've seen over the past 2 months. And after this meeting, we will have a subcommittee meeting that we're planning for the month of April, where we'll share a little more detailed information on what we're looking at, what our work plan is, how we're going to address things as they come up. So there's definitely more information to come. We've spent a lot of time on this issue, and we have not let up on it. Staff is very committed to it, and so we'll share, what we've been doing at the subcommittee meeting.
Okay, thanks, Henry. And just for the public's knowledge, the subcommittee meetings are also public meetings. They're noticed, and it's a more intimate environment, and you're encouraged to participate in those as you are encouraged to participate in these meetings. So why don't we go ahead and do the 2 speaker slips that were speaking to this item, and I'll just start with, did we have any more questions?
Well, I just wonder if it might be beneficial
To do the, I was on the fence.
because that might impact what people say.
Uh,
Usually we see the report read and then we.
Okay, then let's go ahead and do the report.
Did we have a vote needed on the other one, on the
Uh,
turnaround? It was just, that
No,
was-
we didn't have a vote needed on
that was
item
just
14, did we? No,
informative.
that was just a presentation. Okay, so then let's get to item 13, which is a noise abatement program update.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners.
Well, you snuck in the door. I didn't even see you
I've
sneak in
been
there.
hiding back here trying to hide my cough, so I will apologize in advance in case I uncontrollably start coughing. So this is intended to just be a really brief overview to give you a snapshot of the last 2 months and a couple brief highlights on some updates that we have on the program for you. So the complaint, what we call histogram report, has been included in the director's report for the last few years with the intention of making the information available to the public. This is a snapshot of the overall noise complaint program per month. So the noise complaints are tallied by neighborhood. You can see where we have the bigger frequency of complaints and kind of more where the areas of focus and where our attention lies. So for January, we had 113 total complaints. In response to those complaints, we sent out 47 letters to aircraft operators. So the difference in the two numbers is that we research every complaint that we receive, and any aircraft that does not fly a voluntary noise abatement procedure gets notification and education of, hey, on this time at this date, you did not fly the noise abatement approach. Here's the information. Please distribute it accordingly. So we sent, in January, we sent out 47 of those letters. For February, similarly, much lower. We had 68 total complaints. And of those 68, 28 of the aircraft were found to have not followed a noise abatement procedure, and that education was sent forth. So this is really the one of the biggest pieces that we do to contribute is that research and providing that education to pilots, whether it's airlines, GA traffic, or business traffic. And then two brief things I wanted to touch on. Last fall, when we were working through a significant increase in our noise complaints, we reached out to our local air traffic control tower. We have a really good relationship with them, and we just basically said, hey, we're seeing an increase in noise complaints. Can you look into this? We provided them with our information and data, and They in turn did their own research, and they actually reached out to the FAA, the Western Service Center, and the FAA did their own analysis, basically, of air traffic coming into Santa Barbara. Their findings were the same as the airport, which is reassuring for me to see that, yes, our equipment is accurate and it's accurately reporting these aircraft. And they found that there was no significant increase in jet aircraft not complying with the voluntary noise abatement program. So there are some aircraft, yes, that are not following that, but they haven't seen a systematic increase as we were concerned they could be seeing. The reasons for the increase could not be ascertained from their research, but they gave us a list of possibilities that could be related to that, and I'll go into that. And they identified 3 aircraft types, and this is the same information that we found with our own system, that of the turbine aircraft, that it's the CRJ-9, CRJ-200, and the Embraer 175 are the 3 most frequent jet aircraft that are not following the noise abatement approach. And those at this airport are air carrier, and we are sending monthly reports to those airlines showing the date and time of the flight with the flight number so that they're aware and they can educate their pilots so that hopefully the next time they do fly the correct approach. So some of the causal factors that the FAA laid out in their analysis is air traffic control vectoring, simply air traffic control directing an aircraft in a certain location. Air traffic safety and spacing, which is key. Safety is always number 1 in aviation, on the airport and in airspace. Weather avoidance, whether there's clouds or wind issues. Bird avoidance, we have a slough on half of the airport, so birds quite frequently are a big concern for aircraft, and if there's a known bird population or birds flying through the air, the tower will advise pilots to help keep them safe. Additionally, flight crew, they might not be aware of the procedures. The FMS system limitations, so the aircraft's flight system management and how they fly in on approach. Mandatory company stabilized approach criteria, and I'll mention just a little bit on that, or any combination of these. So it could be, weather and birds. It could be safety spacing, and the flight crew hadn't flown it before. They were trying, but maybe didn't know before. So it's often going to be a combination of that. And I did want to highlight that the FAA did kind of remind us that there's a national trend right now of high-performance aircraft, the flight crews refusing to accept anything less than a 3 to 4 mile straight-in approach for safety and for those aircraft performance specifications. So for us, that is not ideal. Our noise abatement approach is about 2.5 to 2 3/4 mile radial off the runway. So we do not want them here flying 3 to 4 miles straight in. But it's just important to understand that that is a safety trend happening in the industry. And while that being said, we do have, the majority of our aircraft operators are still voluntarily abiding by our voluntary program. So we're thankful for their cooperation. Public view, we've talked about this briefly a few times at Commission, and we'll discuss it at a little more depth next month at the noise subcommittee meeting. We've been working with our noise abatement contractor, Harris Corporation, and this is basically adding a public portal into our noise abatement system. So you can use it on a smartphone, on a tablet, on a computer. It'll give real-time and replay flight tracking options. You can look at a flight that just flew over your house. You can look at historical data. It has a 10-minute security delay, but outside of that, it's real time and provides all the information that any member of the community would want to see about air traffic or about what's happening in the air in their community. And I just wanted to announce the noise abatement subcommittee meeting. So it'll be next month, Wednesday, April 10th, 1 o'clock in this room. And as Commissioner Arcuri said, it's a similar format to Airport Commission. Public are welcome to attend, and we'll be providing a very thorough overview of our system, the history of noise abatement here, what we do, what we can't do, and what we're working towards kind of in a work plan to continue to develop our mitigation and our proactive efforts.
Thank you. Any questions on the commission?
I have a question. Looking at the 3 areas that have the most complaints, I'm not saying that this is okay, but I can at least understand the Hope Ranch and Mora Mesa complaints. Is the San Roque, I have no idea why there would be anybody creating noise in the San Roque area. Is this like one person calling in 20 times, or is it 20 different people? I was curious.
The San Roque data is a unique caller, so it's one caller in that area. It's important to remember that we have 2 facets to our noise abatement program. We have the runway 25 approach, which is primarily high performance aircraft, and then the GA traffic, so approaching our parallel runways and requesting that people remain over the freeway or over the ocean. So the concern in that area is more so the general aviation aircraft. We do research all of those complaints. 99.9% of them are unfounded, where the aircraft is not violating one of our noise abatement procedures, or more specifically, FAA required minimums for that area.
Okay, yeah, you certainly should be high enough and quiet enough at that point coming in, and if you follow the freeway, over the freeway. So, all right, thank you.
And any aircraft that are not, if they're not following our noise abatement procedure, or they're not following the FAA requirements, then we do provide education to that pilot, just like we do the airlines.
Thank you.
Or to the aircraft operator.
I'm just curious, when we send the education or information letters to the airlines, is that or to the operators, because it's not necessarily airlines, to the operators, is that a kind of a one-way one-way path, meaning do we get an acknowledgement that they got it? Do we ask for an acknowledgement that they at least didn't file it in a circular bin, or?
Oftentimes we get an acknowledgement, sometimes we don't. The airlines are pretty responsive. Our local tenants here on the airport have been very responsive. For the most part, we see a lot of responsiveness. The bigger challenge is operators that are not here frequently, or a company like ExecJets, NetJets, where it's harder to pinpoint and track down.
When we get feedback from the airlines, are they? I mean, I would be surprised if they research it down to the point of answering back that, well, you know, we talked to the crew, and in this situation, the pilot felt it was more appropriate to have a 3-mile final, and, you know, the pilot in command is the sole, you know, final authority, or does it really, I would imagine it doesn't come down to that level.
Not typically, no. More of an assurance that they'll get the
We got
information
it,
to the
and
pilots.
we will distribute it to the right people. Okay.
But I will mention that if they find somebody who they can track it down to, they will talk to the individual pilot. The problem is they're not in the cockpit at the time the event occurs, and it may be they had to make a maneuver to avoid somebody or another situation. So trying to tell someone how to fly their airplane is really tough, particularly when you get other traffic and you don't have a real good grasp as to what needs to be done to keep. But I would agree that San Roque is a total mystery to me. But if you say if it's one individual, then it's probably got a little bit more understandable.
Yeah, I'm surprised that there are complaints from San Roque. I live in San Roque, and the only thing I'm aware of are the helicopters that beat up Highway 101. I don't recall any turbine coming over. It's a surprise to me that there are complaints from San Roque.
When you say general aviation, do you have it down to a type? Are we looking at light
Piston
airplanes
aircraft.
or something with a turbine component?
No, piston aircraft, GA aircraft.
Any type.
Right.
So
Yeah, we
a
have
Cessna 150 could fly over some guys. Got it.
Right.
Okay, anybody else? All right, well then, with that, we'll pause and deal with, listen to 2 more speakers. I'll remind you, you have 2 minutes. I'll start the clock, and I'm not going to wave at you, but I'll give you a little bit of a, you know, kind of wrap it up. And certainly don't want to get anything thrown at us, so we'll be respectful there. So Greg Feet, are you still here? Still awake? Good.
My name is Greg Feet. I work at Hope Ranch. I've been here before. I'll make this short. I appreciate that you're going forward with the subcommittee, and we'll be attending that meeting. And anything that we can learn more about with the app, with the, what is the name of it? Something View or Public View. Yeah, that sounds great. And we'll see you at 1 o'clock on whatever the date that was that you gave us. And we appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. And lastly, Adrian. I'll even give you a minute of Greg's time. How's that?
Oh, he came in on his vacation.
They did?
For this,
Okay.
So thank you, Greg, for that. Adrian Schuley, Commissioners, thank you for the time. I am that unique caller out of Hope Ranch. I've been calling in for 30 years. The one who talks about the redheads. And I only call in carriers. I mean, the commercial airlines. I don't even deal with the general aviation. And it has been an increase. But my real concern is the message that I have to listen to in order to report has increased. It went up to 1 minute and 32 seconds. It's down to about 1 minute and 3 seconds that I have to sit here waiting in order to register a complaint. There should be a way to hit pound so I can go right into the complaint and get on with what I was trying to do. I know that usually when these the different aircrafts are coming in, it's 3 to 5 aircrafts I have to call in before they stop flying over our home, and I'm uniquely positioned throughout the ranch throughout the day because I take care of different properties. And it's just, but the message, we need to get that down to, 10 seconds I can hit pound and leave what is concerning us. And I'll tell you, I will only call in, I can count the redheads on a lot of these planes, and if they're having Coke or Pepsi. And it's really gotten bad. It got good for a while. I know somebody was really working hard with talking to the different airlines on what we need to do to get in the recommended thing. We always want safety first, but it's starting to get bad again. And I don't know if it's the season, but the last 3-4 months, it's getting back to where it was about 1.5 years ago. It was almost unbearable. So please work on the message going out. Make it so that we can quickly call in these things, and so that me and my assistant can both get back to work.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the, did you have a comment?
Yes, just a comment. I believe with the new system that it will be able to put in those reports via the computer, smartphone, tablet, whatever, which would mean basically no wait whatsoever. Click on it and it's done. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, anybody else? So we'll move on to the director's report. The first director's report.
Yes.
I think I told you it would be boring.
Never dull. Commissioners, I just want to reiterate how ecstatic I am to join such a great team of professionals in Santa Barbara. We really do have a great team here to support you, and I'm happy to now be a part of that team. We have a lot going on. We're extremely busy, but we're handling it all. There are a lot of challenges that we face, but some of those challenges are actually positive. They're good, so we welcome them. You have before you the director's report for March 2019 that highlights much of the work that we've been working on for the past month, and it has been incredibly busy. I've been here now about 6 weeks, and it's been literally nonstop. It's been very exciting, and I'm comfortably getting up to speed on all of the many issues. In the coming weeks, we will have more detailed discussions with you and some subcommittee meetings, specifically on noise, on the FBO planning process, on flight instruction, on lease compliance, and on capacity enhancements. anticipate us sharing more with you, leading up to those meetings. So should you have any questions in the interim, I ask that you do direct them to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, that's it.
Any questions on what's contained in the director's report? Well, we'll give you a pass on this director's report. We'll look forward.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to more words
Okay.
next time around, Henry.
Sure.
But again, welcome aboard. And with that, I believe we're at the end, and we'll adjourn this edition of the Airport Commission meeting.
Great. Thank you.